want you to think about this. From Hashem's perspective, from God's perspective, what is a bigger event of creation? For God to create something good or to create something bad? For God to create something positive or to create something that is lacking positiveness and is therefore negative? Without thinking too much, I would propose that most people would say that to create something good requires more energy because it's good. But if you think about it, you'll understand, obviously, the answer that you're thinking and you're correct is neither is hard. So we can't really use the word hard or easy, but we can use the words novel, Chiddush, newer. When you think about Hashem's point of view, you understand that Hashem is goodness, Hashem is light, Hashem is power, Hashem is energy, Hashem is clarity. And therefore, what radiates naturally from Him is all of those things. And the idea that there should be a being that's not so clear and not so good and not so positive and not so energetic and not so motivated and not so streamlined, not so precise and exact is the Chiddush, is the novelty. In terms of Hishtalshelus, this means the higher you go in Hishtalshelus, the more ideal, the more godly, the more precise the levels are, and the less newness, less chiddush, less novel is those worlds or realms or perspectives or awarenesses, consciousnesses, because they're more in the image of the Creator. They're more similar to what godliness is. The lowest levels, the lowest worlds are the least godly, they're the farthest from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And of course, not only are they low because they lack light and energy, but because they're entangled and they're confused, and the good and evil is all tied up in knots. Is actually a greater novelty. It's actually a greater novelty. Why am I saying this to you? I am saying this to you because there are ideas which seem to us impossible. There are concepts in Chassidus that seem to us impossible. And although they're impossible to us, they're actually very real and very, very important to the world of Chassidus, to the understanding of Chassidus and Jewish mysticism in a profound way. And this little bit of introduction that I just gave you, I hope will help set up the idea that I want to share now, the concept that I want to introduce now. You know, it's very, very easy to understand that a lower world is limited and a higher world is unlimited. Lower world is finite and complex and compartmentalized. And a higher world is more unified and more integrated and more infinite. But what sometimes escapes us is the idea that when you speak of a higher world and you describe a higher world as being more infinite and more unified as opposed to more finite and more divided, a higher world is not only higher than a lower world. it includes whatever the lower world is, in addition to being a higher world. Like Chassidus very often quotes the Avodas HaKodesh. The Avodas HaKodesh makes a statement. And the statement is, Ein Sof is everything. Ein Sof is not infinite, Ein Sof is everything. And if Ein Sof is everything, you cannot define Ein Sof as infinite. Ein Sof is infinite and finite. Because if you define Ein Sof as being infinite and not finite, then it's not infinite at all, it's quite limited. And I want to tell you a story, a little story, it's a vart altogether, and I want to study it a little bit, and hopefully this shmuas, this little bit of a conversation, will help us set up the maamar we're about to learn. The Rebbe Marash, the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe, had two daughters and 4 sons. His oldest and his youngest were girls. In between, he had 4 sons, the way we understand it at least. Of these 4, 2 are very famous, and of course were very great. And I know that what I just said is really inappropriate and wrong, because it's not 2. There's one of the Rebbe Marash children was the Rebbe Rashab, and there's no second when it comes to a Rebbe. But from a perspective of Chassidim, as they were growing up, the Rebbe Rashab had a brother named Reb Zalman, that Azor was 2 years his senior. And Chassidim who were around watched these 2 young men grow into adulthood and saw the 2 of them as giants, and they were giants. As they would turn out, the Rebbe Rashab was the Rebbe, that Azor would eventually be his Chassid, but when they were growing up, they were seen as 2 extraordinary Wunderkinder from the Wunder Rabbiner, the wonder children of the Rebbe Marash. So one of the Chassidim once saw the Rebbe Marash, and he observed about the 2 children that he had that were seen as special, and he said, the Eltere hata beserekap, referring to the Razot, to the Rebbe Rashab's brother, the older one is smarter, the older one is more intelligent than the younger one. And the Rebbe Marash snapped back, but the deeper head belongs to the younger son. I know, that Rebbe Marash didn't want to have an argument with a chassid. How is a chassid supposed to be a maven in the difference between a wunderkind, a wonder child, and a future Rebbe? But this is how the story happened, the way it came down. The chassid said to the Rebbe Marash, I think your older son is brighter. And the Rebbe Marash said, well, my younger one is deeper. And I want to study this story, brighter and deeper. And I'm studying this story in a very, very specific light because of the maamar we're in the midst of learning. There is an expression in the world that may say someplace in Chazal or in Sifrei Machshava of Yahadus from later times. And the expression is Ein Chacham Kabbalah Nisayon. Ein Chacham Kabbalah Nisayon means nobody is wise like somebody who's been tested, someone who's experimented. Ein Chacham Kabbalah Nisayon means basically this. If you were a scientist and an engineer, and you designed a machine, let's say a car, on the computer, and you had a supercomputer, a massive, massive computer that could incorporate enormous amount of data, that would include such things as materials, the weight of materials, the kind of substances of which cars are made, and the power of an engine, and aerodynamics, and all the components that go into producing a car that is energy efficient, that drives well, that has a high level of safety, and so on and so forth. And you would design a car using a computer, putting data into this computer and refining it and tweaking it, refining it and tweaking it. And after you spent whatever time necessary to compute a new car, you would then design a prototype. You would actually create a car that is consistent with your computer model. What are the chances of you producing a prototype based on the computer design, the computer's chokhmah, know-how, and when the car was actually produced, it would not need to be tweaked? there'd be nothing that you could improve. Now, of course, I don't understand technology. I know very little about computers, but common sense says that no matter how precise your anticipation skill is, when you produce the car, you'll always have to tweak it. The likelihood of this car functioning and being effective and being a good sale, or whatever the case is not determined to actually create a prototype. You test it, you discover what in it is not the way it's supposed to be, and you correct it, you heal it, you refine it. Which means to say that no matter how good a skill one has at anticipating and about seeing before what's going to be later, when you actually produce the machine, there's always going to be things that you have to correct. And that's the difference between a groise Kopf and a tiefe Kopf. A great mind is very, very intelligent and knows a lot of stuff and knows how to implement it. A deep mind not only knows and understands, but a deep mind anticipates. A deep mind connects. The operative word is hiskashrus, which is a term we use for das. When you are smart and you have depth, you can anticipate to an incredible degree of preciseness, of accuracy. The smarter you are, the deeper you are, the more precise and more accurate your anticipation can be. But for most people, most of the time, no matter how deep and precise their mind may be, when they actually bring it down to the level of the Nisayan, it needs to be refined. But when you're talking about a tzaddik, you're talking about a Rebbe, when you're talking about what's called in the Sichas, the previous Rebbe Anatzmi, his powers of anticipation, his ability to anticipate, to know before he actually creates the machine or whatever the system is, how it's going to be, has such a measure of precision that you can make the case, you can argue, at least hypothetically, that the machine he would produce would need no tweaking, would be very perfect, would be precise, would be exact. And I think this is what the Rebbe Marash meant when he said to this chassid, the younger one is deeper. Deeper means his mind is in a very high place, but he's very deeply connected to the physical world, to the real world. And therefore, when he brings something from his high place to the physical world, it comes into the physical world with an enormous amount of preciseness. It doesn't need to be trialed and errored, as it were. So, we can debate, we can argue about whether it's possible for someone to have such depth that they can anticipate what's going to come down with such a preciseness, such an accuracy, that when they go from the theoretical stage to the actual stage, they can produce something which needs no fine-tuning, no tweaking. But what is certainly true, that in godliness that is the case. Pardon me. When you're talking about ruchnis, you're talking about elokus, there's levels of godliness that are not only high, but deep. So deep that because of the height of their depth, they are equally connected to the lowest levels of the physical reality, and their anticipatory skill is such that what they produce in the real world would also be perfect and need no correction. So there's lower levels in godliness and higher levels of godliness. And then there's deeper levels of godliness. A deeper level of godliness means that not only is there a lot of light and a lot of unity and a lot of revelation, but there's a lot of transmittability. There's a lot of the ability to bring from a higher level to a lower level, and even from the highest levels to the lowest levels, and even on the lowest level, it would be functional, it would be manifest, it would work. You know that there's an expression in a Maamar, which I find very curious, and I've never come across a mashpia teach this Maamar, let alone explain this expression. When we were growing up, there was a quote which was brought in many sichas of the Rebbe, including the classic sicha, Kuntris, Einyan Shel Teres Chassidus, on the essence of Chassidus, which made reference to a Maamar which was called in those days Ksav Yadach Leinei Dalami, a manuscript of Chassidus whose author is unknown. That Ksav Yadach Leinei Dalami, that manuscript of Chassidus whose author is unknown, has now been published as a Maamar of the Rebbe Rashab, of the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, the previous Rebbe's father. And it says on the heading of the Maamar, Yutas Kisa Tafresh Samach Gimel, and it's printed in the back of the, I suppose, in the back of the Maamar of Tafresh Samach Gimel, as Yutas Kisa of Maamar. It's a very, very interesting Maamar, and it discusses the question, Im Teiras HaBaal Shem Tov Emes, if Chassidus is true, why didn't it come around till the last few hundred years? And there's a whole discussion about Yafut Zohar and Sechachutzas, spreading Chassidus, bringing Mashiach, and so on. But the point which is quoted from this Ksav Yadach Leinei Dalami, which the Rebbe quotes so often, is the idea that the Baal Shem Tov came into the world in order to wake the Jewish people up from a matzav of hisalfos, to wake them up from a condition of faint. And in the course of the Maamar, near the beginning of the Maamar, it says that with the Alter Rebbe, I think with Alter Rebbe, it says, Hischil Neshamas de Tikkun. Begins souls that are called Tikkun. And you could look up the Maamar and see it inside. And you read this expression that with the Alter Rebbe begins the Neshamas of Tikkun, and you scratch your head and say, I thought all Neshamas are from Tikkun. I didn't know Neshamas are from Tayu. And I've never come across a mashpia who would explain what this means. The beginning with the Alter Rebbe, his Chol Neshamas, the Tikkun. And I have no intention of telling you what it means because I don't know what it means. I certainly don't know what it means with certainty. But what I think it means is this, what I just said. Neshamas the Tikkun means they're such high neshamas. And their height isn't only measured in how lofty their soul is, but how deep their soul is. And that depth empowers them to engage in the lowest levels of the lowest world on a level of tikkun, of preciseness, of order. And preciseness of order in such a way where you don't have to do it by trial and error, ein chacham kabbalah nesoyin, but rather the preemptive ability, the anticipatory skill is so deep that before you do something you can imagine, you can envisage what's going to come down, and when you actually produce it, it's perfect, without having to tweak it, without having to refine it. Now where am I going with this? Let me tell you where I'm going with this. In Kabbalah there's a concept of birurim. You know what birur means. Birur means sparks have fallen. And when the sparks fall, besides for the fact that they're falling from a godly to an ungodly level, they're also falling from an orderly to a disorderly state. And birur means to separate the sparks out of their disorder and isolate what's good from what's bad, raise it up, refine it, and bring it back into a state of order. It's called Avedis HaBirurim. And birurim have a built-in contradiction. The built-in contradiction of birurim is that in order for me to fix something that's broken, I have to go to where the brokenness is. In the Lashon Chassidus, hambevarer mislabesh belvushay hamisbarer. If one wishes to correct another, he needs to invest himself into the garments of the other. Now what happens when one invests himself in the garments of the other in order to correct him? So we have the expression in Tanya chapter 28, when you wrestle with somebody who's dirty for the purposes of cleaning him up, in the process of cleansing him, you get dirty yourself. Or to use the classic example, if you're going down into a mine to harvest gold or diamonds, you're going to come out with a dirty face. Diamonds, but a dirty face. Because the diamonds and the gold are hidden in the rock, which is filthy. And in order to get out what's good, you have to engage with what's not good. And that's the problem with birurim. Birurim requires an investment of a neshama. It's called Shem Bana Mizbarer on the lowest levels. That gets so involved in the filth that even though its involvement in the filth is for the purpose for disentangling, to take, for mining, getting out the diamond from the rough that's laying thousands of feet beneath the surface of the earth, but you get dirty yourself. When a neshama comes into this world to do birur, and in the process of doing birur, it dirties itself. So there is a built-in contradiction. I'm trying to correct an entanglement, but in order for me to correct an entanglement, I get entangled myself. Which results in the following. Birur is a good thing, V'haraya, we do it. The Eibishter wants us to do it. We disentangle entanglement by investment. But we're never able to do it perfectly, because we're a part of the entanglement as we do the disentangling. And therefore there's a very, very important concept in Kabbalah. And that important concept in Kabbalah is called B'chokhmah is beriru. The meaning of the words B'chokhmah is beriru is that there is a level of godliness that disentangles without beginning entangled, that gives clarity without investing itself in the entanglement and the confusion. Not because Chokhmah is high, but because Chokhmah is deep. And if you're familiar with the discussion, the roots of this Chokhmah is Gevuras of Atika Kadisha, in which there's a slapshus of Ein Soif, Pnimis Ava, Pnimis Atik. It's a, to use a correct Chassidic term, it's an atzmi, dika godliness, which brings clarity without investing itself in the entanglement. And the argument is that this principle, that you have to have vislapshus of hamavara belvusha mizbar, which means if I'm going to disentangle an entanglement, I need to go to where the entanglement is only because I myself am also partially entangled. But something or somebody that's completely removed from entanglement and has such a clarity that from a distance is able to anticipate how to disentangle, how to unconfuse the confused without engaging, it can simply do so from a remote place, from a distant place, from a lichtika place. And that's what the biggest tzaddikim are. The biggest tzaddikim are in this world, and they bring a clarity to their environment, and they bring a clarity to their environment without dirtying themselves, because they don't have to struggle, they don't have to test and disentangle by trial and error. They disentangle simply by shining a light, a klarkeit, a clarity. We call this in Chassidus Eir Atzmi. Eir Atzmi is a light that comes into this world. And as it in this world, it's Atzmi. It is as light is by itself. And this idea is so deep that when it relates to the complexities of this world, it has a clarity about this world as if it's already lived through this world without ever getting itself dirty. It doesn't have to make mistakes and correct them. It's an Atzmi as Dika Oyer, which automatically sees through till the very, very end. And without having to make mistakes and correct them, it corrects. Therefore, when you learn about Birurim, in Chassidus, there's earlier Birurim, there's later Birurim. The final Birur, after all the Birurim is done, is called the Birur of Chokhmah. Birur Sheni Malmayla Lamata, which makes it perfect. It makes the sparks that have fallen and become entangled and confused, that have through human efforts become disentangled and unconfused, and be raised up and ultimately made into the precious stones which are on the crown of the king. The last step of Birur is done through a light which does not get itself dirty, and it makes it perfect, makes it clear to such a degree that it can't be more perfect, it can't be more clear. It's all done b'derech hayr, and the two are interconnected. In order to create clarity, it's absolute, the position of the one giving the clarity has to be remote, has to be from a distance. This is a very esoteric concept, very mystical concept, very lofty concept. And I believe that's how we understand the biggest tzaddikim. That's the meaning of this phrase in that Maamar from the Rebbe Rashab, Neshama is the Tikkun. And of course the idea is that there are things or people that can come into this physical world that retain that kind of depth even down here, and therefore can bring clarity to the world without getting entangled themselves. Everything I just said ties into food. And the unique food in particular. That unique food is called the manna, which the Jewish people ate in the desert. And there's a very similar concept that says in Maamar Chazal that when Mashiach comes, we're going to be eating a food called Lechem Panog. Lechem Panog is a bread which we're going to eat when Mashiach comes, which is similar to the man. Man is called Lechem and Hashemayim, bread that comes from heaven. And the meaning of man being Lechem and Hashemayim doesn't only mean that it came from heaven to earth and is therefore called heavenly food, but it came from heaven to earth and remained even down here as heavenly as it was when it was up there. The man was magical, had very, very miraculous properties. No matter how much collected, you end up with the same Asira Seif. It tasted, kitzapiches bedvash, whatever that means, but it could have any taste. The mon melted in your mouth, literally, and was nivla beivod. It wasn't digested. It was like eating medicine, minerals. It went straight into the bloodstream, went straight into the body, and provided whatever is necessary for the regeneration of cells and for the provision of energy. But it wasn't broken down and reconstructed. It didn't have to go through the metabolic process, where the food you eat provides for you only by being taken apart and put back together, where some of it is waste and has to be disposed. It was perfect, and it was already digested. All you needed to do was eat it, and it went straight to its task without having to be processed. Because man is b'chochma, is beridu, as it was physical, manifest on the physical earth. All food cannot be eaten without preparation. There's at least 2 steps of preparation. The first step of preparation is it needs to grow. Whether it's a plant or an animal, it needs to grow from a seedling into an actual food. The second preparation is it needs to be digested. And sometimes between the preparation stage of growth and the preparation stage of digestion, there's the preparation stage of cooking. Man didn't have to grow, didn't have to cook, and was not digested. Because man did not need any breaking down. It was already broken down. Man was perfect food. Man was literally the physical manifesting of godliness that was so clear and so perfect that even the way it was a physical food that retained that clarity. It was Lechem and Hashamayim even on earth. So man wasn't different than other food only because it came from heaven. Man was different than other food that it was heaven even on earth, and that's not because it came from heaven, but because it came from a very deep place in the heavens. Besides it being a very high place, it came from a very deep place. That depth allows that even as the man somehow materialized and became physical food which a person could collect with his hands and put in his bag or in his pocket or in his basket and take home and then eat, it needed no clarification, no clarifying, because it was clear in essence. So there was on earth a physical food that did not at all relate, was not at all similar to other physical foods as we understand them. Now the thing that I want to say in conclusion is the thing I began with, that actually for the Eibishter to create man is easier than the Eibishter to create bread. And again, the word easy is not correct because you're talking about God. Nothing is easy, nothing is ad lebechayev, lebekeach, and so on. But it's closer to him, so to speak. It's less of a chiddush to produce on earth a food which is as clear as the Creator, who is the source of all clarity, is natural. To create a food which is entangled, needs to be disentangled, this is a chiddush. And this is called Lechem and Hashamayim and Lechem and Oretz. Heavenly bread versus earthly bread. Now, if you were with us last time, when we learned the first part of the Maamar, we had a lengthy discussion about food. And now food is a process of birurim, of separating good from bad, to extract the sparks of toyud that find themselves in the world of tikkun, that should nourish the body and cause the neshama to remain attached to the body. And there's a bunch of steps in separating and isolating and raising up and correcting and so on and so forth, because you're dealing with something that requires birur. Now we're going to talk about Lechem and Hashamayim, which required no birur. And amongst other things, we're going to discover that the benching, the Birchas Hamazon, which is considered mid'oraisa, it's biblical, at least the first 3 brachas, the first bracha of benching, we're thanking Hashem for Lechem and Hashamayim, for the man, for the Lechem Panag, and for the idea that Hashem can nourish in such a way that the nourishment that comes down even to the physical world is absolutely clear. And the second bracha Shmoneh Esrei is the nourishment which is the Lechem Minna Oretz that needs correction. So let's begin. V'hine, I'm on line 77. Yesh oid bechinas lechem. There's another category of food. And the second category of food, shenikra lechem min hashamayim, it's called bread from heaven. V'hainu lechem shel hamon. This means the bread of the mon, the manna. Kumesh shekasev, and the pasuk states, Hineni mamti lechem, I will cause it to rain down upon you. Lechem min hashamayim, bread from heaven. However, this bread which rained down from heaven, to use a philosophical term, is not like rain, it's actually like dew. Inyan, it's the concept of bechinas tal, the idea of dew. And dew is different than rain. Rain, we believe, ascends from earth to heaven and comes back down. Dew comes directly from heaven. Tala de bedulcha, the dew of bedulch. Bedulch literally means crystal, and it means something transparent and clear and pure and perfect. As the pasuk says, that when the Jewish people got manna, it came along with dew. And there's so much mysticism that explains that the manna was the same madreg of tal, which is the gimel of the shenis of Atika Kadisha, which is the source not of height, but of the kind of depth. I explained at length in my introduction. Says the Rabbi on line 79, V'hinei Amon Yorad B'schos Moshe. We had manna, the merit of Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? Shehu Ma'ad Shebechach. Because Moshe is the same thing. Moshe was a physical person, a physical personality, whose clarity was not only in the highest heights, whose clarity was not only in his personal existence, but whose clarity radiated to everything and everybody that he touched. He had such depth that when he was involved in the simplest person in the lowest place, the clarity that he radiated was automatic. It's the name of God called Ma, as it is in a state of etzem, as it exists in relationship with itself. And Ma means clarity. Ma means depth. And if you were here last time, we discussed at length that Ma means bittul, which is the basis for the clarity and the depth. And it's higher than the whole idea that ideas, intellectual ideas, radiate on such a level that they could further descend when they come down into the world of midas, in order to govern them. So the light of the mind which comes into the heart to govern it is, the ideas are limited, the feelings are limited, and it's a series of steps of reduction, tzimtzumim, which have to do with an exactitude. While chachma, the level of ma associated with the mon, it's a level of depth and a level of etzem as it exists in relationship with itself. So what we call the essence of godliness. The essence of godliness has a great depth. And the depth of the essence of godliness is such that wherever you're going to bring it, it's going to create clarity without getting yourself dirty. Says the Rabbi on line 81, since Moshe Rabbeinu represents a level of godliness called etzem, we find that Moshe Rabbeinu identifies himself as a kfat peh v'gemen, as a hard mouth. It's difficult for him to speak. Saying, I have a difficulty with speech, is that he had a difficulty with Torah, but the oral Torah. And Moshe Rabbeinu's difficulty with using his tongue goes on Torah Shebeksav. In other words, the Zayar says that when Moshe Rabbeinu says it's hard for me to speak, this is understood mystically that Moshe Rabbeinu cannot even speak words of Torah, because even Torah, relative to the atzmius, relative to the depth of Moshe Rabbeinu, was chitzenius. Chassidishe Parshah, Abba Moshe Rabbeinu comes from the depths of chokhmah. As it exists in relationship with itself, higher than the level of ideas that shine, that radiate, that reveal themselves. And the measure and the divisions of the Torah, such as kosher, puzzle, Torah, v'chulu, fit, unfit, and so on. And of course, when Torah comes down to the world, you have to decide if it's kosher, it's not kosher. And the way you decide if it's kosher, it's not kosher, is you get involved with it. Moshe Rabbeinu is above all of that. He has automatic clarity to see what's right and what's wrong without having to be mislabish to invest himself to create the clarity. He therefore says, I can't speak. And they have the Torah Or in Parshas Shmos, the famous Maamar, which we learned here years ago. That Moshe Rabbeinu says, I cannot be the one to give the Torah to the Jewish people because I have no connection to the words and to the revelations, because I'm the atzmi, I'm completely secret. My godliness can bring clarity, but the clarity my godliness brings is above the levels of revelation of godliness in the world. And the Eibush answers him, Misam Pelad, I will give you the power to do so. I will give you the power to bring forward words that are revealed and at the same time come from your atzmius. Therefore says also, who am I? But he uses the word anechi. And the concept is, and how can I be the one to take the Jewish people out of Egypt, considering that I'm so far removed from them that I'm on the level of anechi? Claim it in other words. Where do I come off to be the one to take the Jewish people out of Egypt, and they should receive the Torah? His taina is, his argument is, he finds himself incapable of descending that low. Even to descend low enough that from him should come Torah, because he's above Torah altogether. In other words, even Torah is a revelation. Even Torah is a light that comes out into this world on a level where you can say, in Chacham Kabbalah and Asayid, it needs to be tested. Moshe Rabbeinu does not need to be tested because he's a Neid Atzmi, and he therefore claims, I'm so high that I can't even be the transmitter of the Torah. And the Eibush says, I want you precisely for this reason. Since you are above the entanglement of the Torah, you were able to introduce the Torah in a clear way. I, the Eibush says, I, as I'm in relationship with myself, will be with your mouth. Who is godliness as it exists by itself. Higher and higher still, Abba, for the level of Chochmah. Higher and lower are equal. The fun of his mamish, darkness, light are equal. But not darkness, light are equal and I don't care. Not darkness, light are equal and it's arbitrary. Darkness and light are equal and you have such a clarity, you see straight through the darkness and straight through the light. Everything is crystal clear. So Moshe Rabbeinu is this incredibly high level. He's an Atzmi. Moshe Rabbeinu has the kind of clarity which is not going to be improved upon when he tests it, and Chacham Kabbalah is saying, because his clarity goes till the end. And Moshe says, I have nothing to do with this world, and Eibush says, but I want you to have a connection to this world. And therefore, along the same lines of Lechem, this is why Moshe Rabbeinu was the source of the schos that we got Mon. The root of Man is Lamaila. The place from which man comes is higher than Misarusa de Latata. All of us understand the relationship between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that it's reciprocal, we give and he gives back. And there's a level where we have Isarusa Latata, we do an arousal from below. And Eibush to reciprocate with an arousal from above, so we get according to what we give. Moshe Rabbeinu represents a getting which is completely beyond anything we could possibly give. And think about it in practical terms. Nothing we can give God is perfect. And Moshe Rabbeinu represents perfection. Hainu, in other words, when one affects a clarity in the sparks of Torah that have fallen. Nimshach Hamad Me'era, the Torah brings down very high lights, but the lights that he's bringing clarity to, and even the lights which he's revealing as a consequence, are imperfect. While the Man is Lamaila, is above. That's a level of godliness which is so atzmizdik, which is so by itself, that it's above the need to clarify. It's automatically clear and automatically affecting a clarification. Rak. So if Moshe Rabbeinu is so high, how does it come into this world? And of course the answer is that Hashem gives him a special koyach. It's drawn down into Chochmah, the level of Moshe. And the Eibush says, Hashem himself says, I will be with your mouth. And through this, Yachal laid it, Moshe can descend, Ulahashpil, and lower himself lamata down to this world, V'lihiyes lamata, to be down here, K'meishu lamai lamamash, as he is above. And you know, this is something which is absolutely impossible to measure. You know, we have different levels of tzaddikim, big tzaddikim, little tzaddikim. What do we know about tzaddikim? We only know that we don't know. Some tzaddikim are holier. Some tzaddikim are not so holy. Some tzaddikim perform more miracles. Some tzaddikim perform less miracles. But one of the aspects of a tzaddik which is very, very special is the depth of a tzaddik. And the depth of the tzaddik means the connection between the tzaddik and the world. And the bigger he is, the better he's connected to even the lowest things in the world. I remember, I have a friend who's a grandson of Tzvi Yuir, Mr. Steinmetz, Rabbi Steinmetz, he was a poet who wrote poetry that was well received in Israel. He received all kinds of awards, and the Rebbe very much encouraged him to write poetry after the war. And some of his poems are to the Rebbe himself. And one such poem, which I think he wrote for the Rebbe's 80th birthday, describes contrast, how the Rebbe, involves contradictions. And one of the contradictions that he points out is that the Rebbe has his head in the clouds and therefore has his feet firmly planted on the ground. That statement, and the Hebrew is very poetic, his head is in the clouds and his feet are planted firmly on the ground, is not about how smart he is and how great he is, but how deep he is. Moshe Rabbeinu represents this depth in the ultimate way. And I think this is true of all Rebbes, and particularly when it says in that Maamar, Neshamas de Tikkun, that there are certain Neshamas that have such a height and such a depth that they can anticipate and engage with the deepest darkness of the physical world and know beforehand what's going to materialize, and anticipate and accordingly create the perfect model of response, of reaction, without having to do trial and error. And Moshe Rabbeinu represents this more than anybody else. And it was found in the physical world in the form of the physical food called man. And the Rebbe says on line 93, Man comes from the level of akudim. And what does akudim mean? Everything is tied up into one vessel. And everything being tied up into one vessel means it's a very powerful light there that's mavatal, that eliminates any separations. But the idea that it's unified in akudim doesn't only mean that it's mavatal all kinds of separations, but it has the depth that we described above. Now I need to interrupt and share with you an idea that I touched on last week. I made references to my Morim, Koirach, Tafrei Shayin Aleph, Tafrei Shayin Daled, which is a part of Ayin Beis, Hemshchayin Beis. But I didn't give you the full presentation. I want to do that now. I mentioned to you last week that this is a Maamar from Alten Rebbe that talks about Ma. Remember, we talked about three things, the different Tayu and Tikkun, the third one was Ma. But that the Ma of this Maamar seems to be different than the Maamar you have in later Maimorim. What I want to share with you now is a discussion on the concept of Hiskalalus. Hiskalalus is a very, very important concept in Kabbalah and in Chassidus. Very, very important concept. Hiskalalus really is the process of tikkun. Tikkun means order, and tikkun means, according to the conversation we're having tonight, depth. And the ultimate depth is so perfect that it cannot be more perfect than it is. And of course, according to the conversation that we had for the first half of this shiur, the only way something can be so perfect that more perfect than this cannot be is only when it comes from someplace which is totally removed from the complexity. So I want to talk you through the concept of Hiskalalus. In the Maimorim, they talk about different types of Hiskalalus. Hiskalalus means you have different parts, distinct parts. And the distinct parts are integrated, they're interconnected, they join together. So in these Maimorim, they speak of three examples of Hiskalalus. And as a rule, the first Hiskalalus is less than the second Hiskalalus, and the second Hiskalalus is less than the third Hiskalalus. But you'll see, as it relates to us, that it's not that simple. The first model of Hiskalalus is what you and I would call Oisa Shalom B'mreimav. You have Michal and Gavril, two malachim. They don't get along at all. They can't get along. Michal is Chesed, Gavril is Gevura. There's no basis for a cooperation between Michal and Gavril, because Michal is Chesed to the exclusion of Gevura. Gavril is Gevura to the exclusion of Chesed. In other words, neither of them shares anything with the other. But Oisa Shalom B'mreimav, when you stand in the presence of the Eibishter, of God Almighty, everything is bottle. This is called Hiskalalus by his batlus. What's sometimes called Maimorim Heder Tfisas Mokim. You shine a great light, and whatever differences, whatever diversity, whatever detail may exist is swallowed up by the great light, and it ceases to be distinct aspects, if it ceases to be distinct aspects, there ceases to be a need for integrating distinct aspects because they've been integrated, they became one. It's a powerful light that brings together many aspects. But of course, the deficiency in this first method of Eskalos is very simple, because it's not real. Take away the light and they're back where they were before. Mecholang of real. In the presence of God Almighty, get along. The Eibishter Kvayochel is not present and they're at war again. And they're his batlos, they're being included in a divine light that overwhelms their distinctness and their differences, is not transforming. They remain distinct, but overwhelmed. And because they're overwhelmed by higher light, you remove the higher light, they're back to what they were before, and therefore their integration is not really an integration, it's a hisbatlos, it's a breaking down of differences, which will re-emerge when the light is removed. That's a scholarless number one, being overwhelmed. Then there's the scholarless number two. And the scholarless number two is called chalishus. You have two beings that are very, very competitive, very incompatible, and you weaken them by a higher light. You weaken them. What happens when you weaken something? When you weaken something, it becomes more tolerant. It allows for the opposite, for another. This Iskalus is not as dramatic, but at the same time, it has a deeper effect. It's more true. The example for this second case of Hiskalus is Moichen, that people have emotions. You can feel very strongly one way about something, I love it, or you could feel very strongly another way about something, I hate it. And in as much as emotions are concerned, it's either this feeling or this feeling, there's no compatibility. But reason, the mind, softens your emotions. It quiets them. It weakens them. And when the mind is engaged and softens the emotion, it's not only that you love it less or you hate it less, but it becomes possible that there should be a little bit of love and a little bit of hate. And this little bit of love and this little bit of hate is a symptom of the moyach weakening the poles, the extremes of this midah by itself and this midah by itself, and allows that every midah should include their counterpart, the opposite. So this Iskalus is not as total as the first Iskalus, but it's more real because it's actually transforming. The first Iskalus is you're overwhelmed by a unifying light. Take the unifying light away and you're back to what you were before. Competing, mecholang of real, no compatibility. But when Moyach weakens, this is transforming. The weakening is not destroying you, it's softening you. And the softening is permanent, the softening is real. And as a result, the second Iskalus is considered deeper than the first Iskalus. Notwithstanding, it's not nearly as strong. And then there's a third Iskalus. And the third Iskalus, which is called the Maamar Ma. And if you were here last week or last year, you know that in the Alter Rebbe's world, the Iskalus of Ma is the one I just finished, Moichen. But in later Maimorim, they speak about Ma in a deeper way. And the only way for me to describe Ma is to say that at the very core of every single aspect that is separate and distinct is a sense of its purpose. When each aspect in the creation gets into itself and finds the point within itself where it is serving a divine purpose, then there is perfect cooperation, total integration, without any being losing its personal identity. Ma means you find the core, the depth, the essence within yourself, which is serving the Eibishter, and the Eibishter is one, and his purpose is one. And therefore, every single aspect, every single being continues to be what it is. It doesn't have to be weakened. And at the same time, they're completely joined together in a perfect harmony because they're all collaborating to achieve the same end, which is the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's the third Iskalus. And this third Iskalus is called Maamar. You don't know what's the head and what's the foot, because the foot is the head when it comes to walking, the head is the head when it comes to reasoning, and as far as God's purpose is concerned, just like God's purpose is not complete if there's a lack of a head, God's purpose is not complete if there's no feet, and therefore the feet and the head are equal. not equal in their individual roles, but equal in the fact that only together can they fulfill the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you have three hiskalalus. Hiskalalus by being overwhelmed, which is entirely superficial. Hiskalalus by being weakened, which has some measure of depth. And hiskalalus by finding common purpose, which is a real integration. Each aspect brings out from within itself how it contributes to the purpose of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is one, and his purpose is one, and therefore the integration is perfect. Why did I just give you these three hiskalalus? I gave you these three hiskalalus because we're about to learn a hiskalalus which I think goes into none of the categories that I just listed. It's a fourth hiskalalus. And I'm not sure how to place it. And I'm not in a position to have clarity about it. But nevertheless, by preempting, by telling you what says in the Maamar, the three classic examples of hiskalalus, you'll appreciate the uniqueness of the fourth hiskalalus we're going to be learning now. So let me repeat myself one more time. The first hiskalalus is a very powerful light that bittles all differences, but bittles them in such a way that that powerful light is removed, the differences return. The second is a light which weakens, so it's partially transformative. And the third is a light which reveals the loyalty to the one God which is hidden within each creation, and therefore the hiskalalus is perfect. In our Maamar, he's going to introduce us to a hiskalalus which is called akudim, or a hiskalalus comes from akudim. And he's going to argue that the hiskalalus from akudim is, like the first of the three hiskalalus that I mentioned, a very high light that bittles diversity, differences, and unifies them. But the light is not only high, but deep. And since the light is not only high, but deep, it's transforming. There are all kinds of diverse parts, aspects, and the light shines, which is very, very high and very, very deep. And by the virtue of the fact that it has not only a height, but a depth, it actually takes away the different aspects of the diverse variety, or the various diverse things that are involved in the hiskalalus in a permanent way. In a permanent way means to say, if you remove the light, they will continue to be one. So it's the first type of hiskalalus because it's idei oyer elyon, it's by a much higher light. But it's not like the first type of hiskalalus because it's not only chitzoniistic, it's a pnimiistic inyan. You'll see later on that our Maamar is going to argue that there's a hiskalalus which is even higher than this one. And because later on in our Maamar we're going to have a hiskalalus which is even higher than this one, it's very difficult for me to call this the hiskalalus of Ma. Because the higher one has to be the hiskalalus of Ma. And as a result of that, I'm not sure exactly where to put this. Is this one of the three that I mentioned before? Is it a fourth hiskalalus? But from a technical perspective, you have to see it as four different things. An overwhelming light that integrates and unifies in such a way that when the light goes away, it comes apart again. A light which is not so overwhelming, which weakens. A light which identifies the God which in each aspect, which makes them perfect. And then the new idea, a light which overwhelms and unifies, but in such a way that even if the light were to be removed, they would remain one. Mon comes from that level, akudim, a very powerful light that's integrating different aspects, but integrating different aspects in such a way that they've actually become one, and that's what mon is. Mon is an eir atzmi, a light of godliness which is so high, which is one, and therefore when it relates to the world, it's clear. So let's now continue. We're on line 94. Shebechinas hiskalalus, shebechinas akudim. There is an integration, there's a unifying of parts from the level of godliness called akudim. It says that it's very different than the integration of parts in the world of tikkun, which is atzilus. Which begins in the world of brudim, which is atzilus. Shehu, because in atzilus, hiskalalus means that there are many distinct vessels. Be'eschalkus kaven that are divided up not just in different vessels but in different poles. She'oifen hiskalalu some that the integration of parts and level of atzilus, hu aidei bechinas bittel. It requires a bittel. Meha'oras shema shebachachma by radiating a light of ma, which comes from chachma. And the Rebbe argues, shehi ha'oras ha'meichen b'midas. It's a radiation of ideas into feelings, which weakens the feelings. Aidei hislapshus ein seif b'chachma by the manifesting of ein sof in chachma. Mitam shayedei ha'oras ha'meichen b'midas. For the reason of that when the brain shines into the measured and distinct feelings, miskalalim gam beis hafche, it integrates two opposites. Like the joy and the chesed and together. But that is mitzat chalishes hamidas, the weakening of the midas. And the weakening of the midas is the second of the three eskalalos that I gave you in the introduction. Because the mind radiates and controls the heart, and weakens the midas, they shouldn't be felt as separate and distinct, betokfam and all their power. So the Rebbe says, Atzilus is a hiskalalus from moichin, weakening midas, which in the last shir was called ma, but it's a oras ma. It's only chalishas. Says the Rebbe, Avo bechinas ha'iskal shel bechinas hakudim, as opposed to the integration of parts associated with the world of akudim, who ki'af gam b'yeis hamidas betokfa, the midas are in their full power. Afal pekei, nevertheless, misachtem, they become one. Umiskalim, they become integrated. Yachad mitzad gili ein sof bohem, by a very powerful godly light which unifies them. Bebechinas hashleimus dafka, which is perfect and whole. Now, you would assume, and I would assume, that the hiskalas of akudim is the first of the three hiskalas that I mentioned. And you know now that the first of the three hiskalas that I mentioned only looks good, but it's not good because it's not permanent. And atzmi is like a light shines, and bittles, diversity, take away the light, the diversity is back. So superficially, akudim is like the first hiskalas that I listed. But look what he says now. Umitzad gili ein sof shebahem. When this godly light radiates upon the diverse aspects, there's no longer opposites at all. There's no longer divisions. Because their current force is not connected to their individuality and distinctness. Godliness takes them over, and godliness becomes their force, which is perfect and makes whole everything. V'lachein, which is why nikra okar b'kliyachad is considered tied together in one vessel. It's no longer many vessels and many poles being integrated in as much as they're still distinct. There's a great light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Rebbe is describing a hiskalalus where light simply is obliterating differences. But the description of this light, which is obliterating differences, which is being described here, is different than the hiskalalus we normally read about, because here the point is this light is not overwhelming them, but obliterating them. The difference between overwhelming and obliterating means when you overwhelm differences, when that overwhelming force is removed, the differences is back. When you obliterate differences, they're no longer different. Which means, in other words, the hiskalalus of akudim being described here does not fit any one of the three categories of hiskalalus which are discussed in the Maamar of the Rebbe Rashab, the Ayin Aleph and the Ayin Dalet. It's different. And I'm not sure how to place it. It's superficially the most similar to the first hiskalalus. Its effect is the most similar to the third hiskalalus. But it's not the first, it's not the third. It's someplace in between the third and the second. It's more than the second and it's less than the third. So we're going to have to accept that there's a lack of certainty about the learning. But without being able to neatly place this hiskalalus. This hiskalalus is an overwhelming light, like the first hiskalalus, but it's transforming, at least like the second hiskalalus, and perhaps even like the third hiskalalus, and the first hiskalalus is not transforming at all. And Mon is this level. Mon is a godly light at the level of Akudim. That means there's variety, there's diversity. But the godly light is so powerful that it makes it all one. And whatever expressions will come from this powerful light, in other words, even if diverse expressions will come from this powerful light, there'll be expression of that oneness. And Mon represents that. And the way we understand that in relationship with the world is that it represents the kind of depth and clarity that even when it comes, pardon me, to the lowest level in the lowest worlds, it retains that absolute ability to be clear. And we continue now in line 105. Ihine, im kol zeh. If you'll tie together what we learned last week and what we learned today, and the difference between what we learned last week and what we learned today is that last we talked about the idea that there are sparks of godliness that have fallen, that needs to be separated and uplifted, refined, and included in godliness. But derech eslapshus, you have to eat food and you have to digest it, and it's a process. And today we added the idea that there's a level of godliness that has a clarity, that does not involve a process, it's just an absolute clarity. When you join these two concepts of bira b'derech eslapshus, and bira b'derech oir atzmi, Yuv and Mashamad Azal, you can go back and talk about the first and second brachas of benching, of birchas hamaz. Shamad Azal birchas azantik in Mesha, the first bracha of benching was initiated by Mesha Rabbeinu. And the first bracha of benching, which is initiated by Mesha Rabbeinu, talks about Lechem and Hashemayim, heavenly food. And heavenly food doesn't only mean it comes from a high level, but even as it comes to the lowest world, it's in the same image as it was in that high place. And the first bracha of benching, everything is spoken in third person. We don't say God's name. We simply talk about Him. He. We don't know who He is. Feeds everybody because it's coming from such a high place, which we don't know what it is, other than to say Him. V'hainu, this means. Mipnei, for the same reason, represents Ma, on the level of Etzem. It's not the second Iskalos, how Moichin weakens Midas, but weakens is not totally transforming. With such a powerful level of Ma, that it's completely transforming of differences. All detail is concealed because everything is included in the oneness of godliness. And this is not just a height, it's also a depth, that even when it comes down into this world, which is so diverse, it has a clarity about every aspect of the creation. Line 109, then you get to the second bracha of benching, which is talking about lechem and oretz. Earthly food is complicated. First of all, it has to be prepared by the Eibush. It has to grow, whether it's a plant or it's an animal, it's a process. There's a whole series of steps that account for the process by which living organisms reproduce, be they plants or animals. Then it needs to be prepared. Sometimes it has to be harvested and cut and ground and kneaded and so on. And finally, it has to be processed a third time as the person digests it. Now you're talking to God Almighty in first person. We thank you, we submit to you, because it's a lower level of godliness, the kind of level of godliness that we can talk to directly. The second bracha of Shemini is talking about earthly food rather than heavenly food. The Hainu Lechem, this is the kind of food which we know. Shayedei birurei manu mad, which involve a clarity from the feminine aspect. It means from raising up from earth to heaven. And from the masculine heaven, which means it's meeting, a koyach, which comes from heaven to earth. Shuakel, b'bechinas malak alam, and it's limited godliness. Which is why in Berchas Ha'aretz we say, V'alakel anachnu meidim. We submit. Submit means we don't understand, we don't feel, we accept. Loshen Heidah means to submit and to thank. Einyan Heidah, this idea of submission, and the expression of the Gemara, the Chachamim acknowledge that it's submitted to Rabbi Meir. That even though the Hainu Beis HaChelkim Zem, I'm sorry, even though there's two diverse opinions, Nevertheless, one submits his will to his fellow, it's called submission. That's meaning it's not transforming, it's not transformative, it's simply submission. So, the Lechem min ha'aretz is not a powerful light that unifies to the degree that there is only one. It's a weaker light that also unifies, but by weakening. And because it unifies by weakening, there are still two positions. One is simply submitting to the next. And on line 113, it says, there's two ways of knowing. Now, if we had more time, we would elaborate on this, and we don't, so we're going to have to make it brief. But these two opinions are not in God, they're in godliness. There's two perceptions in godliness. There's two ways godliness knows everything. There's a way that godliness knows everything, that there is a world which is batal ta'akadosh baruch Hu. And there's the way godliness knows everything where all there is God. And that's called das tachten and das elyon. Which goes with the Pasuk says, kihil deis havaya. That in havaya there's 2 days. Yesh das from l'mata l'mayla, there is a form of knowing God. From the bottom to the top, and that means shagash mesu yesh. The lowest world is real. And the higher world is very theoretical. Because we can't understand it. The other das is from the top down, who behave as exactly the opposite. The real thing is spirituality. Because that's the real essence and the source of life, which is yesh. The Gashmi says batal because it has no reality. And which is true. One perspective says the world is real and God we don't know. The other one says God is world, the world has no reality. And since you have two realities, so on the highest levels, one reality destroys the other reality. On a lower level, you still have two realities. One simply submits to the next. It's weakened. Shanachnu made him, we admit, Shagashmi is batal, that the Gashmi is batal, the truth is as it is by him. In other words, when you have a bittul, which is Aidei Chalishas, one is weakening the next, you still have two. It's only that one is maided to the other. It's not the bittul of Akudim. This is the advantage of one who learns Torah does mitzvahs down here in this world. And what is the effect of Torah mitzvahs in this world? To raise it up from a state of independent existence into bittul ta'akadosh baruch. And the Rebbe connects it to a classic idea. Chassidishe says, based on a Gemara, that what we do in serving Hashem is greater than what God did in creating the world. And one of the rayas is that the Eibishter created the world with one hand, and we create the Beis HaMikdash with 2 hands. The world was created with one hand, af yod yosta eretz yimin triple shamayim, and the Beis HaMikdash is mikdash adnei keiner yodecha, 2 hands. But here he says a different word. When the Eibishter created the world is from bittul to metzias. And the world hides the godliness. And the acts of people, tzaddikim, eiskim, mitzvahs, learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, make from the world bittul ta'akadosh baruch hu liyasakel k'mei shu kamei. Everything should be as the real is the presence of HaKadosh Baruch. What man does is considered greater than what God does. Why? The Gemara says, we know a rule. Mishmaya may have yav mishkel shakli. Heaven loves to give, but it doesn't take back. The story of Chanin ben Deisa, that he was very poor and his wife complained that he had a golden leg. And they later said that golden leg came from the Elam Haba, and Chanin ben Deisa asked that it be taken back, and it was. So the Gemara says the second miracle is greater than the first. Because Mishmaya may have yav mishkel shakla. The heavens give, they don't take back. It's easier to make from an ayin to a yesh, and to raise up from a yesh to an ayin. The godly energy necessary to bring forward a world from a bittul state into a real state. Allow it to be revealed in the level of a malak. The godly energy involved in descent and creation, creation primarily happens from letters, as the Pasuk says, Hashem creates the world through the Tzimtzumim and the Asias. This is the process, the Tzimtzumim, which God Almighty creates and gives. There should be brought forward all the time, a light and a flow. of godliness, Einyan, from a hidden state, Liation to a revealed and independent state, Lahasavas Elam, is to create the worlds. So the Eibishter creates the world through Tzimtzumim, hiding himself and producing a world. This is the first way of knowing, which is Shamul Mailo, Lamata, from the heaven to the earth. That from God's perspective there is nothing, and that God introduces a world. But what tzaddikim do is greater. They transform. They create clarity. Through the idea of tikkun, parts of Adam. They cause the world, which already exists, to be raised up. So from Ayin to Yesh is creating a world. And Ayin sees everything as godliness, and Yesh allows the world to exist. And from Yesh to Ayin is that the world which exists becomes Batal Ta HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when we give ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we have a bittul, it's called Meidim. And again, the idea is that even if this world is Batal Ta HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're not saying there's nothing other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It simply means that we are weakened. And therefore, Meidim, we accepted the truth as the Eibishter, but we still exist. So the first bracha Shmoneh is not Meidim. Pardon me, the first bracha of benching of Birchas Hamazon is not Meidim. The first bracha of Birchas Hamazon says there's nothing but God. Period. Because it's a much higher hiskalos. It's hiskalos of Akudim. The second bracha of benching is Meidim. It's a lesser hiskalos. It's hiskalos like Chalishas. In other words, the way I'm teaching it to you is you have 4 hiskalos, 1, 2, 3, and then an anomalous one, some of which we cannot fix exactly. The hiskalos he's describing here is the second one, the chalishos. The hiskalos of akudim, which connected to the man, is some place between the second and the third. Then it says, Ve'inyan u'mevarchem eisachu. Pardon me, when we submit to HaKadosh Baruch Hu because of weakness, we bless HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And of course, blessing HaKadosh Baruch Hu means bringing HaKadosh Baruch Hu down. The difference between blessing and submission. When one submits, we submit that the truth is God's perspective. It's not revealed. It just weakens us. The word bracha is actually revealed that when we submit to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because we've been weakened by the divine energy, it brings down afterwards additional light. Now, you notice that I'm rushing through this piece, and I don't regret it. Every once in a while you have to sort of accept that you can't learn and teach every point. What I want us to extract from what we learned tonight is, last week we learned one concept, basically, which is the concept of birurim b'derech hislapshus, the struggle of clarity. And this week we learned 2 concepts. First of all, birurim b'derech or, which is man. And second of all, an understanding of the difference between lechem in ha'aretz and lechem in hashamayim. Lechem in ha'aretz is birurim, like we learned last week, which is a scholars b'derech halishus. It's not totally transforming. And then we have the eating of man, which is higher than birurim, because it shines an eir atzmi, and automatically everything becomes batal absolutely. And that level is not only weakening the divisions, it's obliterating them altogether in a complete and in a permanent way. What you're going to find out next week is that above the second level, above the hiskalos of akudim, there's even a deeper hiskalos. And that's going to be the hiskalos of Shabbos as opposed to man, as you'll see in Mitzvah Hashem then.